Now we're recording. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah McAnulty. I run Skype a Scientist. And today we are having a session just for educators. We're going to be talking with two of the folks at Zooniverse. They're going to be telling us all about how you can incorporate their program that connects people with community science projects using the internet. And so it's a really, really cool program. And we hope that you can all get a lot of use out of their work and what they do. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce our two guests today, Molly Simon and Grace Wolf Chase. Thank you so much, you two, for being with us today.
No problem. We're excited to be here.
Great. Okay, I am going to just hand it over to you two and hide myself so that the most of the screen is seeing you all and not me. But yeah, take it away.
Okay, Grace, do you want me to start off? Okay.
Yes.
Let me share my screen really quickly. Do I have screen sharing privileges, Sarah?
You do.
Okay, 1 second. I'm also just going to close the door to my.
And also, everybody tuning in at home, you can feel free to ask questions using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. After Molly and Grace go through what they have to say, we'll go through all of the questions that you have as well. So if you have questions, submit them and we'll get to them after they talk. And you're muted, Molly.
Can you hear me now?
I can, yeah.
And can you see my slides?
Yes, they look great.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to start off the presentation by talking about Zooniverse a little bit more generally and what citizen science is and what we do at Zooniverse as a platform. And then Grace, at the end, will talk a bit about her specific Zooniverse project getting faith-based communities involved in citizen science. So first, I just want to begin with a general overview about what citizen science is and what the Zooniverse is. And over at Zooniverse, we like to refer to citizen science as people-powered research, because scientists in a vast array of fields, from astronomy, biology, geoscience, even zoology, post their collections that usually entail hundreds or even hundreds of thousands of images and text or sound-based data now, and anyone, regardless of their background or age or location in the world, can answer these series of short questions and do what we call classify on these projects. And this actually helps the science teams actually analyze part of their data. So it's amazingly effective. Each project has a certain limit of people that look at each image. So sometimes that's 15 people, 8 people, 30 people, depending on what that specific project sweet spot is. And researchers can really synthesize and study the data that comes from these citizens actually helping them classify on their projects. So the Zooniverse works by volunteers classifying independently on the data. And as I mentioned earlier, there's usually between 3 and sometimes 80 classifications per image, video, or text file, and we call those subjects. The responses are then bundled together for consensus. And then the consensus and the raw data are made available to the research teams and eventually open to the entire public. And then volunteers, if they find something interesting or innovative, can interact directly with the research team on what we call our Xuniverse Talkboards. So Zooniverse began with a single project called Galaxy Zoo, which launched in July of 2007. And ultimately, the goal was to process over 1 million images of galaxies from the Sloan Digital Sky Survey, which was this new and innovative all-sky survey in 2007. And the research team at first just needed to bin all of these galaxy images into 2 different types, spiral and elliptical galaxies. And at first they gave this task to one graduate student who did a quick back of the envelope calculation and found out that it would have taken him at least 3 years of around the clock effort to complete this task. So They eventually decided to crowdsource this part of their research, and several thousand people participated in Galaxy Zoo's first launch and completed the task in just a matter of months. And each Galaxy image was classified at least 38 times. So this rendered excellent quality data for each image. And the research team classified on a subset of the galaxies, and they found out that there was about a 97% agreement between the volunteers and the experts. So this success of Galaxy Zoo ultimately led to the foundation of the Zooniverse platform. Now, when we have computers that basically can do everything, I think that a lot of times with tasks like these, we think to ourselves, why don't we just have computers do these tasks? And that's because humans have this innate ability to recognize patterns. So we can look at a data set and complete a specific task. And we can also look at something and say, that's weird or that's unique. And maybe the computer wasn't trained to identify that. I apologize, I have a puppy barking in the background. So this brings me to one of the most well-known or serendipitous discoveries from the Zooniverse platform, which is the green pea galaxies. So when researchers started with Galaxy Zoo, there were these little green blobs that weren't part of the taxonomy of separating galaxies into the two bins of spiral and elliptical. So there was a discussion thread that was started that was titled "Give Peas a Chance." And a small correction of these green pea looking blobs, like the ones pictured here, were being discussed in the Xuniverse Talkboards. So other volunteers had contributed to that discussion thread, and finally there were over 100 comments. And so this really set off the research team to say, this isn't an anomaly in our images. This might be something worth studying. And the research team actually found out that these green peas are small, very compact galaxies, and they're one of the most active star-forming regions in the entire local universe. So if it weren't for the volunteers who were trained to look at spiral and elliptical, but also knew to identify something unique, this discovery may have never happened. So Zooniverse began with a single project called Galaxy Zoo, and now it is expanded into a much larger site. It's actually the world's largest online platform for citizen science. We have we've hosted over 120 active projects. In 2020, we actually reached the 2 million registered volunteer mark. And as I mentioned earlier, these projects cover a whole array of disciplines. So you don't just have to be an astronomer or someone who's interested in astronomy to be a part of Galaxy Zoo. There are projects that cover a whole span of interests and scientific topics. And now we've even gotten into digital humanities and history and projects along those disciplines as well. So anyone can make a Zooniverse project. We have this project builder that's open to anyone who has a Zooniverse account. The URL is here, and I can send these slides out to Sarah, and so you can have access to all of these URLs. But anyone can make a Zooniverse project if you have an abundance of data. If you want to have the 2 million plus volunteers actually classify on your project, then you have to go through beta testing of your project through the Zooniverse team. But if there's just a project with curated data that you want to use in your classroom, you can build a mock Zooniverse project and launch it right away without going through beta and use it directly in your class. So if you have any set of curated data or maybe a small subset of data that you want your students to work on, you can make your own customized Zooniverse project. The project builder is incredibly user-friendly and it's ready to go as soon as you click publish for your students to work on. We also have this new classroom interface that's affiliated with Zooniverse, classroom.zooniverse.org. It's an online platform where instructors can access curricular materials that are based on or directly related to active Zooniverse projects. And right now we have 3 different class activities on classroom.zooniverse. So for example, this Wildcam Gordon GOSA lab and the Wildcam Darien lab, they're more targeted towards a middle school audience. But with projects like Wildcam Gordon GOSA, middle school educators can set up private classrooms and then invite their students to join through an email address. And educators have access to full data sets and can curate or manipulate their own data sets based on their student learning goals. And there's these pre-made activities and resources all available through the educator portal. And then students can also sign in and access all of the trail camera data for these projects and complete the assignments that they've been tasked with by their instructor. And then we've adopted a similar model for more advanced high school and introductory college students. And these explore topics relevant to introductory astronomy, like the HR diagram, galaxy shapes and morphology, and Einstein coefficients. And this is in the Astro 101 with Galaxy Zoo section. And there's even in this an extensive research experience that allows students to basically generate their own hypotheses and explore this giant galaxy-based data set to answer research questions of their own choosing that they come up with in small groups, and they analyze the data and ultimately make videos and peer review other students' videos. So this is a much more extensive, a little bit more high-end research project that's embedded in the curricular materials in the Astro 101 with Galaxy Zoo section. So when I was working as a postdoc at Zooniverse, I expanded on some of these classroom.zooniverse efforts and made 2 additional 75 to 90-minute labs. One that teaches students about extrasolar planets or planets discovered around other stars and how we can identify them using something called the transit method. And the second is more of an ecology, biology-based project that uses a Zooniverse project called Floating Forests, which has volunteers classify kelp in satellite images around the world. And kelp is an excellent proxy for teaching students about climate change, because kelp environments are very significantly affected by small increases in ocean warming. So this project teaches students about climate change and the effects of ocean warming on these different types of habitats. So I just want to very briefly go into what some of these activities are, how these 2 activities are structured. And as I mentioned before, they're 75 to 90-minute labs. They're in 3 parts where students learn about the topic in this kind of guided Socratic method question and answer text/data-based exploration, which we call in the education research community a lecture tutorial. So we're not just giving them pages and pages of text they have to read through, they're actually doing some sort of matching tasks or filling in the blanks, or there's some interactive way that's teaching them about the topic that is covered in the lab. So in this case, it's exoplanet transits. We then give them practice identifying, in this case, transits on a curated set of what are called transit light curves, like you're seeing in this GIF. And this gives students the confidence to see real data and interact with the data before they go on and actually classify on the real citizen science project, which in this case is called Planet Hunters Tests. So they do the practice module, and then they make between 25 to 40 classifications on the actual project. And then it finishes by participating in a more data-driven exploration that focuses on giving students access to the full data set of transiting exoplanets that have been discovered to date, and they help characterize this full set of transiting exoplanets. And we follow a very similar model for our Floating Forests climate change project, which is this activity that uses kelp biomass, or basically amount of kelp and how it changes over time, to teach students the implications of climate change on ocean warming and these ocean ecosystems. So students use kelp biomass data directly exported from the Floating Forest project to deduce how kelp populations, specifically in Tasmania in the Southern Hemisphere, are responding to climate change. If you want a more extensive list of all of our Zooniverse learning resources, we posted a very in-depth blog post kind of in the beginning to middle of COVID, because there was such an uptick in our requests for online learning resources. And many of these resources can be utilized in in-person classrooms, but they also can be utilized in classrooms that are still functioning totally online. And that's what's great about the Zooniverse platform, is that the only barrier to entry is an email address. And so you can have your students contribute to real research from whatever their iPads, cell phones, or computer situation is while they're learning from home. And like I said, I can send these slides out to Skype a scientist, so you can have access to this blog post, because in the short amount of time that we're here today, I have barely even scratched the surface on all of the different types of activities that we have available and that we outline in much more detail in this blog post. I have our emails up for questions, but I would like to turn it over to Grace first, so she can tell you a little bit more about her specific project.
Thank you, Molly. Okay, so I will screen share now. And hopefully everyone can see a slide that says science for everyone. So a little bit about me. I'm an astronomer or astrophysicist who studies how stars form. And throughout my career, I've been interested in integrating research with informal education in various ways. For you teachers, I've also given many astronomy and career presentations at all levels of education. So if you're interested, by all means, contact me in the future. I just have a couple of things to add to Molly's presentation that might be of interest. The first is about a discovery by citizen scientists that led to a research project and an article in an academic journal that is aimed entirely at kids and their families. And the second is about an initiative that Molly mentioned at the beginning that I lead to engage culturally and religiously diverse communities in citizen science with Zooniverse. And I wanted to just briefly mention how a few of these efforts might be of interest to teachers as well. So this is an initiative that I lead along with the American Association for the Advancement of Sciences program Dialogue on Science, Ethics, and Religion. So Molly told you about green peas in Galaxy Zoo. I'd like to tell you just a little bit about the Discovery in the Milky Way project, where volunteers discovered a new class of star-forming regions that they tagged as yellow balls, because these objects show up as roundish yellow features in infrared images of the Milky Way. By infrared, I mean these beautiful images that you see down here. Your eyes would never see that in the Milky Way. These are images that use colors that our eyes can see to depict, to represent light at invisible infrared wavelengths. And thanks to the efforts of citizen scientists on this project, my collaborators and I now have a catalog of over 6,000 of these objects that are helping us to learn how different kinds of stars develop. So after we published our first research paper on these objects several years ago, the editors of a new journal at the time, Frontiers for Young Minds, approached us to write the first astronomy article because they found it so interesting that the research was made possible by a discovery by citizen scientists. Now, this is a great journal. It covers diverse STEM fields, and it's aimed typically between ages 8 to 15 and their families. The articles are written by scientists, but they are reviewed by the children, often with help from their teachers, so that the articles wind up being understandable to the different age groups. So as Molly also mentioned about Zooniverse, all of these projects come with talk or discussion boards that are moderated by members of the research teams and often by advanced participants in the project. These people are wonderful to invite to perhaps participate in classroom discussions on the science behind specific projects. As an example, I recently co-led sessions entitled God and Physics for middle and high school youth groups, along with the youth leader at Sunnyvale Presbyterian Church. And we used the very popular Galaxy Zoo that Molly mentioned. We did a tutorial on what we were looking for, how to classify galaxies. And I talked about how the shapes of galaxies can help us learn about the evolution of the universe, while the youth leader had the students think about how the size of the universe and the prospects for extraterrestrial life connected to their personal understandings of God. So Zooniverse is great to use in different kinds of group settings. It works very well at youth camps as well as with youth groups and in the classroom. I did want to mention that April is Earth Month and Citizen Science Month, and Sarah reminded me, I guess it's also DNA Month. So this is a great time to think about incorporating an environmental research project in the classroom. Social justice and good stewardship of the earth are valued across diverse cultures and religious traditions, which recognize that the poor and disenfranchised among us are often the first to suffer when an environmental disaster hits. So Faith in Place and the Chicago Muslims Green Team are two of many organizations devoted to environmental awareness and practices. And on April 6th at 6 p.m. Central Daylight Time, we're going to be co-hosting a free-to-all webinar on using Zooniverse that focuses on research projects specifically in ecology and the environment. The leader of one of these projects, Chicago Wildlife Watch, will talk about how this project is monitoring urban wildlife and addressing biodiversity in the greater Chicagoland region. And as Molly mentioned, she has worked on floating forests, is a great project to use even with very young kids. There's a wonderful blog in the Educators Forum about using floating forests with second graders. So finally, I wanted to let you know of a workshop that I think would be of particular interest to high school and middle school biology teachers. This is a workshop that will be happening on Saturday afternoon on April 24th. It's sponsored by the American Association of Physical Anthropologists. And the workshop goals are specifically to support middle and high school teachers in teaching about human origins, evolution, and other biological anthropology topics in religiously and culturally sensitive and inclusive and engaging ways. So there'll be presentations and leading a session on how Zooniverse can be used to bridge cultural divides in science education and science engagement. So I want to invite all of you to think about registering for that. I think it will be a very, very interesting workshop. So I'm going to end now on that and open for questions. As Molly said, we are very happy to share our slides. Let me first stop my screen share. So I'm perfectly happy to share my slides with Sarah after this webinar. So up for questions.
I think that sounds great. We can include also we can send an email to everybody who registered for this session with a link to those slides. And we can also include them in the description of the YouTube video so that anybody who watches this afterward who maybe couldn't make it at this time can also access that as well. So
that would be great, Sarah. Thanks.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. All right. So our first question comes from Jennifer Burke. If anybody else at home has questions, please submit them. We're here to help. Jennifer asks, after we register, how do we set up a classroom with Zooniverse?
So I can share my screen and actually just quickly show you the process. It's very straightforward. Having a little bit of internet connectivity issues, but just make sure that this is an internet bug and not a Zooniverse bug. But basically what you do is, here we go. I'm getting my connectivity back. I am going to share. Okay, if you can all see my Zooniverse Classrooms page. So what you would do is you would go into a specific project. So I'm going to click Astro 101 with Galaxy Zoo. What's really important is that you have to be signed in. So make sure that you sign in before you access the Classrooms page. Otherwise, it will tell you to sign in and it won't take you here. So once you get into the specific activity page, you can just click Create a New Classroom. And then you would input your name, your institution, a brief description of the class. And then once it's generated, it will start to look like this. And you'll get this little green copy join link button, and you can click it and it has generated the join link. And then you can email out that join link or put it on your class LMS or however you contact your students. You can send that to your students. And then if you click this little pencil icon, you can actually see who the students are that have registered for your class, and you can see their scores on the specific projects within the module where the scores aggregate in real time. And that join link is here again for you to send out to your students. And then this is how you can keep track of how they're performing in your class and remove them. And then for each of the activities where you get aggregate data from your students, you can just click this export button. And depending on how many data sets are in the queue, because we are a small group, sometimes there'll be a little bit of a backlag. So you may have to check again like 5 minutes later, but it shouldn't take longer than that. And it will export all of your class data. So this is how you create a classroom. It's slightly different for the Wildcam projects. For example, in Wildcam Darien, you go to the educator profile, you click manage classrooms, and then you would say create new classroom. And then it's pretty similar from there.
Very cool. So we have a couple clarifications from Jennifer. I'm just going to read the three of them all together. First, do you have to join the project first before you do this? And she doesn't see a create classroom project on her end. So do you need to like register as an educator specifically in order to do this?
So you don't. What you do have to do is log in on the regular Xuniverse.org website. So sign in with your Zooniverse account and username on the Zooniverse website, then go to classroom.zooniverse. It should connect, like if you're logged in on zooniverse.org, it should also connect with Classroom. But in the last couple of months, there have been some connection issues with the Classroom page, so it may make you log in again. And once you're officially logged in, then you should have the create a classroom option. You only won't have it if for some reason you're not logged into the platform. And if there's any issues for some reason you are logged in and you're not seeing it, then you can just email me directly and I can reach out to our backend developer team, because that shouldn't be happening. But just make sure on the top right-hand side of your screen, you see your Zooniverse login name, because that will show. And the site for the classroom is classroom.zooniverse.org.
Awesome. Thank you. We've got a question from Josh next. How concerned should I be about students possibly generating bad faith data, such as if one student isn't getting the task, but just tries to click through to say we're done dealing with middle school students? I'm sorry about my cat screaming.
No, it's fine. My dog was barking too. It's just part of working from home.
My cat too.
So, Josh, it really depends on what you're saying. If your students are classifying on the actual project, then that's why crowdsourcing is such an unbelievable tool, because the reality is it doesn't really matter if your one or two or even three students are generating bad faith data or just clicking through, because their answers will essentially be aggregated out depending on what the rest of the crowd classifies the image as. So you'll notice in your class, if they're contributing on a classroom project, that through the classroom.zooniverse page, that's coming from a curated set of data. So their responses aren't actually contributing to the live project. If they're classifying on the live project, then if they're just clicking bogus answers, it will be essentially washed out by the power of the crowd. And Zooniverse actually has a built-in algorithm where they see how one person is performing compared to the consensus. And many of our projects are actually built to weight certain people's answers less heavily if they continuously classify against the consensus. So we have a built-in algorithm to deal with that, and we happily welcome middle school students to classify because they're not going to break the data. If that answers your question.
That's awesome. You've thought of everything. This is really great. So we don't have any questions from teachers at the moment, but I have, oh wait, no, now we do, just kidding. Carl has a question. Is there a way to connect students in a group to show they are part of a larger group in Zooniverse? Can we create a group to show the group's classification totals?
So on the classroom page, when you get that data export, you can see the group's classification totals. But like I said, that will be for a curated set of data. We don't have a way right now to track individual people's performance on Zooniverse projects. Students can keep track of their own classifications. It's one of the reasons why we don't offer Zooniverse for any sort of like signed outreach hours or anything like that, because we actually don't keep track of groups overall classifications. But if a student has an email address and a login with Zooniverse, the Zooniverse actually keeps track of their individual classifications. So as soon as you log in on the main page, it will tell you how many classifications you've made to date. So if students are interested, they can see their personal classification record, and then they could aggregate that into a spreadsheet or something for the class. But we don't track, for example, like group users unless there's a specific reason, which may be great, can talk about in terms of like keeping track of the people who contribute and being able to attribute new users to being a part of these faith-based organizations. But the general protocol is that we don't generally track groups of our users. It's kind of like a privacy thing.
Right. Cool. So I have a question. So when you are using your program with groups that are more faith-based in what has brought them together, like what projects do you prioritize, or like how do you approach that?
So Sarah, that's completely need-based. We use what appeals to the specific community. It might not even be a science project. I'm working with some synagogues that are interested in projects like Every Name Counts, which basically looks through records of Jews that were persecuted by Nazis, and transcribes to the data to go into a meta database so that people can identify individuals who were persecuted, who died in the death camps, et cetera, et cetera. So it's basically the project that I'm involved in right now is a pilot project, and the idea is to first form relationships. Zooniverse is great because it's kind of ongoing participation, right? So it's a great way to form relationships that you don't just give a lecture and then say, bye folks, do with that what you want. So the idea is to establish long-term relationships first, and then maybe get into other issues. So with the youth group, for example, God and Physics, they were interested in astronomy. They were interested in galaxies. I would have gone through Planet Hunters tests had it been active on the website at the time. It wasn't. They were currently out of data. But the idea is to basically fit themes, fit the science with the interests. And what Molly referred to earlier, that group capability, I'm really looking forward to a time when Zooniverse has a more flexible kind of a group tracking, because I think that would work really well with different community groups so that they could see how their participants were participating.
Right. The impact that they're having as a group.
The impact, yes, exactly.
Awesome. Folks, if you have any more questions, you can submit them now. But thank you too for joining us today. This has been very, very cool. I feel like there's a lot of overlap in the goals of both of our programs, and so I'm really glad we were able to connect our programs.
Me too. And as I said, Sarah, if anybody is interested, Molly could put up the email addresses, and we're happy to talk with people further if they're interested. As I think I mentioned, I also give a lot of career and astronomy presentations. So if anybody, has a career day and they want input from an astronomer, contact me.
Sounds good. Let's give it like another minute for question submissions, and then we'll wrap it up.
Sure.
Sounds good.
Is there anything else that you'd like to share with us before we wrap up?
Oh, good question. Probably 5 million things that I'll think of after we end up here. Just also for the teachers who might be involved in faith-based communities or want more information on working with students, with different types of students, I encourage them to go to the website. I can share this very briefly if you want. So this is the web page that the AAAS Dialogue on Science, Ethics, and Religion created for a program. You can get a nice little introduction to Zooniverse there, the little 1.5-minute movie on what Zooniverse is all about. And then some of the reasons why religious communities might want to become involved. We also have participation surveys that if people are interested, these participation surveys help us evaluate how the platform is working for different groups of people with different interests. And there's also a link to the Zooniverse Project Builder tool for scientists that Molly told you about, where researchers can build their own projects. So yeah, so that's sciencereligion.dialogue.org/project/Zooniverse.
Great. We have one question, Grace. Do you do presentations for primary age children, age 7 through 11? That question's from Rachel.
Absolutely. When my kids were, I've got 3 kids, and I've spoken to kindergarten classes, 2nd grade, at all levels, really. I can modify presentations for the grade level.
Great.
Absolutely.
And one more question from Carl. Are there any projects on Mars data or images?
Yes. So Zooniverse has one very popular Mars project called Planet 4, which is currently out of data, but now they have a new Mars project called AI for Mars, which is teaching Mars rovers actually how to classify Martian terrain. This is more of an intermediate project. The current workflow basically requires people to look at Curiosity mass cam images. So you can check out the AI for Mars project, or wait a little bit longer, and the Planet 4 team, which is identifying geological features on Mars, they end up uploading data periodically as they get more in. We are also about to get not necessarily more Mars data, but just a lot of really exciting new astronomy-based citizen science projects with our partnership with LSST, or the Vera Rubin Observatory. And so through that partnership, they're planning to crowdsource an abundance of the new data that's going to come in from their All Sky survey. So there should be some really cool new astronomy projects on the horizon. But if you're excited about Mars, definitely check out Planet 4. It's out of data, but you can still go in and classify on old versions of the project and see how it works. Or you can contribute to AI for Mars, which is our newer project.
Awesome. Well, I think that wraps up our questions. Thank you so much for both of you for sharing your project with us. I hope our teachers get a lot of use out of your program. Yeah, so Erin, thank you for signing for us today. Is there anything else you'd like to share before we wrap up?
I think I would just quickly like to note that we are a really small team over at Zooniverse. So sometimes you'll log into one of our classroom portals, or you'll try to export the data, and things won't be working as smoothly as possible. So please feel free to use our email addresses and contact us. We have direct lines of communication to our developers and the rest of the team, and we will try to resolve these problems as quickly as possible. But just understand that we at Zooniverse are not this giant corporation. We're a group of, I believe, maybe 10 developers in total that are managing 2 million plus users. And just please feel comfortable reaching out to us, and to understand that we definitely want to get things working for you as quickly as possible. But with this huge influx of people using our online resources, we just have to, we're in this together. And if you have any issues, then know that there are real people behind the help desk, and we're genuinely trying to help.
I relate to that. There's just one person working in the Skype scientist.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Relate.
And just to add to what Molly just said, the individual projects, the scientists and the moderators of the discussion forums, also sometimes they get backlogged, but my experience has been they love questions from people working on a project, and they are more than willing to take the time to interact with the people who are using the discussion boards. So use those discussion boards.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you so much again. If you want to share this video with your fellow educators, this will be up at youtube.com/Skype-a-Scientist later today. Once it uploads, pretty much. So thank you again. Thank you, Erin, for signing. And we'll see you all next week, hopefully. So this coming week for classrooms, we have a session with a woman named Brie Genet. She studies how marine mammals talk to one another. So communication in marine mammals is going to be super cool. Her work is in Hawaii. And then next Saturday, we'll be talking with folks at Illumina all about how you can incorporate DNA week into your, or DNA month really, into your curricula and classrooms. So we hope to see you then. Hope y'all have a good rest of your weekend. And thank you again, Zooniverse folks, for coming.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.